try it now. Hi there, sir. Can you talk to us just for a second?
Sure. Hey, it's Nathan Ballard. Can you hear me okay?
Now, your health, your safety. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. Welcome to our daily special called Getting Answers. Today's a big one, as we heard Governor Gavin Newsom give some answers earlier today and the framework needed to start reopening the state's economy. But first, let's get to the question everybody wants. Process. Here's what the governor said.
I know there's going to be dozens of questions, more specific. Tell us exactly when. Let me just answer that question. In 2 weeks, if we see a continued decline, not just flattening, but a decline in hospitalizations and ICUs, and we see this workforce and the infrastructure and PPE needs met as we anticipate around May, first week in May, to start seeing the benefits and fruits of that, ask me the question then, and we will be in a very different place where we could be more prescriptive on giving people timelines. I know you want the timeline, but we can't get ahead of ourselves and dream of regretting. Let's not make the mistake of pulling the plug too early, as much as we all want to.
All right, so ask me later. Basically, let's check and see our progress in 2 weeks. So joining me now to break this all down for us is ABC 7 News contributor and Chronicle insider Phil Matier and Nate Ballard. He served as Gavin Newsom's communications director when Newsom was mayor of San Francisco, now in PR. So good afternoon to both of you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Kristen.
Hey, all right, Nate, I think I want to start with you because you know Newsom better than anyone. So translate for us, what's he actually saying and not saying with that?
Right. So I think that in a situation like this, a leader needs to have, there are three parts to this. You have to have the facts, you have to have a plan, and you have to have the credibility to deliver the facts and the plan. And so Governor Newsom knows that he can't go out there and say, well, we're going to reopen California in 2 weeks. Instead, what he did is he laid out 6 criteria that had to be met before we can even make this determination. And I think that, by doing this, he's not squandering any credibility. He's giving us the facts, and he's also outlining sort of a way forward without saying anything that he definitely will be held to in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, because he really can't at this point. But let's throw out those 6 indicators since you brought them up. We have a graphic to show you what those 6 indicators are, the ones that he will use and be guided by to decide whether it's time to start the reopening process. So one, that is to make sure that there is good testing, contact tracing, and 2, prevent infection in people who are most at risk. 3, handle surges in the hospital and health systems. 4, develop therapeutics to meet demand. Now, that is something that sounds like it will take a long time. 5, ensure businesses, schools, and childcare facilities can support physical distancing. And 6, determine when to reinstitute certain measures, such as the stay-at-home orders. I think all of that is meant to sound, hey, this is not going to be willy-nilly based on my instinct. It's going to be based on fact and science, which right. Whoever wants to jump in here, that sounds perfectly logical. But in this day and age, it almost sounds a little political as well.
Well, it is. And it's also, there's an economic component to this as well. We have to understand that it was just a week ago that Governor Gavin...
Phil, you go first. Sorry. Due to our, issues here, because we're all on Skype or Dejero or Zoom, I'm just going to call on you. Phil, why don't you start on that?
Okay, as I was saying, what we're seeing today is Gavin Newsom basically pivot. Remember, it was just a week ago that he was saying this could go on into June. We haven't seen the big crest yet. There was questions about his modeling, or the state's modeling, on the impact of this virus. There were questions about, okay, were the hospitals going to be able to handle it? That was the issue a week ago. They appear to be able to handle it. That puts us in a different place. And along with the governors on the East Coast who said we're going into a different place, and the president, everybody sort of said this is a time we've got to turn a bit. We've got to start talking about recovery as well as preparedness for the epidemic. And that's what the governor is laying out today. He said a little bit of light, a little bit of hope, and that's basically what he offered. We haven't really seen a plan. And to accomplish what he's talking about, those goals that you set out, that's going to take a lot of work, a lot more work than shutting businesses down. He's got to get something out there that tests, that makes sure everybody's okay, and still gets the economy back on track, because while he doesn't want this to be a political decision, people who are sitting there, you know, the rhetoric's okay, but they got to pay the rent, and that's what he's going to have to deal with as well.
Yeah, Phil, unfortunately, Nate is not able to hear you, but Nate, you can hear me, right?
Right.
So I want to address that. You know, Phil brought up the point that, you know, people were starting to feel like, hey, we need a little glimmer of hope, or at least know when that glimmer of hope and that light at the end of the tunnel may come, and that there is some political pressure, you know, I mean, logically from businesses that are looking at going under and saying we need to start making money again, workers, gig economy workers, which is such a big contingent here in California of the workforce, saying, hey, I got to, you know, bring home some money, and then the parents who are at home saying my kids need some education soon. All of this has got to be mounting pressure on him right now, very quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody can feel the pressure. You know, I've got 4 kids, and everybody's studying from home, and it's really you know, everybody. I mean, he is feeling the pressure. He's got 4 kids himself that are now you know, studying at home, and he's got ties to the restaurant business, and the restaurant business is struggling. You know, by some estimates, 25% of restaurants around the country are going to close. I mean, he is feeling the heat. However, as the leader of the state, he cannot overpromise and underdeliver. He's got to give us the straight facts. He's got to give us a clear plan forward, and he's got to deliver it with credibility. And so I think that, you know, in a situation like this, he's doing everything that he can to give us all the information that we need. And he's doing these daily briefings at noon, which I think a lot of people are tuning into and listening to. And I think it's just, you know, it's really, he tries to give us good news in little pieces, like right before we went on air here, the DMV deadlines are going to be extended. So you know, he's trying to do everything he can to make life easier on his constituents. But I really think that most of his constituents appreciate that he is not overpromising anything.
I was going to say, Nate, from your years of working with him, is he someone who tends to err on the side of being overly cautious or overly optimistic?
I think that there's 2 sides. On the one hand, if he's launching an initiative, he can really reach for the stars and talk about and really inspire people, like he did with marriage equality, where he's really, really going out there and reaching for the brass ring. But in a situation like this, in a crisis, he really comes alive, and he immerses himself in all the facts, and he really gets to know all of the science and all of the pertinent facts before he makes a decision. And I think right now, we really appreciate a governor who is focusing on the science and the facts rather than just going with his gut.
Yeah. Okay, Phil, I know you were also watching the governor's news conference earlier today. He talked about how when we do start to reopen and go back, if you will, it won't be life as we knew it, right? When you go to the restaurants, it's going to be a different experience. Maybe they have half the tables. Maybe the menus are disposable. Tell me what hit you as you listen to him talk about some of the changes that we may have to confront as we start to go back to some semblance of normal life.
Well, what hit me was, one, that, you know, like a lot of us, he said, big events, forget about it for now, for the foreseeable future. So are we talking about football? Are we talking about baseball? Gay Pride is canceled, its celebration, which brought 1 million people to San Francisco. So are those days gone, and for how long? Are we going to be wearing masks now whenever we go out in public? But, you know, Christian, some of the things that weren't in there was that California, he likes to think of as a nation state, but it is still hooked up to the rest of the United States. And all of what he is talking about is going to be influenced by what Nevada does, what Arizona does, what Kansas does. All that is yet to come into play. And what might not happen here might happen somewhere else. So the question, I didn't hear anything about when opening up more airports, travel, things like that. He has laid out a very difficult task in the next 2 weeks to put together the team to try to get us to that point where life isn't going to be the same, but it's going to have the semblance of normalcy that he's talked about. And it's not going to be easy. Getting the testing done, getting the people who need to be protected, getting making the calls on schools and such like that. This is the tougher part of the equation. And so That is a big part that remains to be seen. It's one thing to give a roadmap. It's another thing to get into the car and drive it.
Absolutely. All right. I want to explore more on California's relationship with other states and his relationship with the other governors. I think it's time to take a short break on the air. And then our conversation, of course, continues on live stream platforms right now. Be back on air in a couple of minutes. All right, gentlemen, we're in commercial break. So here's a chance for us to talk about what we want to with our viewers on Facebook and other live stream platforms. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you know, when he talks about redesigning office spaces and stores and things like that, that sounds awfully expensive. And could businesses afford that given how much money they've already lost through all this?
Do you want me to go there? You know, there's a three-part, we've seen three words at play during this pandemic: request, require, recommend. First comes, we recommend you do something, like you said, social distancing, changing the tables in a restaurant. Second thing is we recommend it. In other words, that's a little stronger, maybe the locals. The third is require. And some of this is going to be up to the locals. And the question is, are you going to request, are you going to recommend, or are you going to require these different things? Are you going to require that only 20 people can be on a bus? What's the impact of that on mass transit? Are you going to request it? Those are the three words, three big differences.
Yeah, I mean, transit, you've been following the situation on Muni. That's been sort of a mess because we've heard a lot of reports, and Phil, you've reported on this, that there's actually a lot of overcrowding, right, after they cut back routes. Is that still happening?
Well, just yesterday I was on Market Street and a couple of transit cops got out and they said, what are you guys doing? They said, we're going over to the bus stop here at Powell Street and we got to keep an eye. We have to keep a count. How many people are on the bus? How many get off? How many can get on? Maintain social distancing, but also try to keep people who, by the way, can't get on the bus and the next one's not coming for another 20 minutes from getting upset. So it's a balancing act out there still. And you have people that can't get to a bus because their bus route's not running right now.
All right, gentlemen, we're coming back on air, so hang on for a few seconds, and then we're back on air on ABC 7. All right, we are back on ABC 7 News with our contributor, Phil Matier, and also Nate Ballard today, who is Governor Newsom's former communications director and friend of the governor, to lend some perspective after the governor's big news conference today, talking about how we would go about the process of reopening without giving us a firm date. I'd like to throw up for our viewers the graphic we have of the four goals that the governor said, until we have immunity, these are the four goals that we will abide by as we decide what to do. They need to be aligned with these goals. So to ensure the ability to care for the sick within our hospitals, so far we're doing okay with that thanks to flattening the curve. Prevent infection in people who are at high risk for severe disease. Build capacity to protect health and well-being of public. Reduce social, emotional, and economic disruptions, which right now is very much disruption on all those fronts. And then no timeline to modify stay-at-home order. So again, he didn't give a firm date, but he said that those goals would need to be met first, which sounds like an awfully long process, because if we're talking about a vaccine, guys, we're talking about possibly 12 to 18 months is what Dr. Fauci last said. Realistically, how long can a governor, even easing up some restrictions, but still having partial restrictions, ensure that the economy doesn't tank, that your immigrants who come here to work don't go back home, that you don't have unemployment rolls that swell? What do you guys think? What does he need to do here?
Nate?
I think there are no quick fixes. Yeah, okay. There are no quick fixes, and I think he's being straight with us. He's being honest with us, and he's, you know, each one of these 6 criteria that he laid out. And none of these are easy goals to be met. He knows, he's making it clear to us that this is going to be a long haul, and that he's got our best interests in mind, and that he is balancing the economic reopening with the health and safety of Californians. And it's just, there's no doubt about it, this is going to be a long haul, but I think that his constituents appreciate that he's being honest with us about it.
Christian, I thought the toughest goal that he has, the 6 you laid out, is preventing the infection of, let's say, the elderly, the vulnerable. That's the tough one. I mean, we can stock up the hospitals. We've kept the surge from coming. We have, determine when to institute certain measures, that comes after it. Ensure businesses and child care facilities can support physical distancing, that can be accomplished. Develop therapeutics to meet demand, we can do that. Handle surges at hospitals, right. But it's preventing the infections, because eventually you come to a point where you say, we are going to have to live with a certain infection rate and a certain amount of people going into intensive care and hopefully no one dying. But there's going to have to be something along that line, as there is with any sort of disease. And that question is, when do you reach that point and say, we're going to start opening it up? It also requires a lot of testing. We don't have the mechanism for that yet. Those are two sort of like real physical things that have to be done, and the economy will follow that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, number one is containing the virus and how many get sick. Number two, though, is the recovery, right? The economy. He will be judged on that. And he wants to be judged well by that, because we all think he is headed for bigger things, perhaps one day running for the White House. So I want to ask you, how important right now is what he does with this pandemic, with him being in the spotlight, being the governor of California, in relationship to anything he might pursue in the future?
It's very important. I think that at this point you have two governors that are really standing out, Andrew Cuomo and Gavin Newsom, and both of them are talked about, obviously, as White House contenders in the future. And I think that, no matter what their next steps are, they are going to be judged by how they conduct themselves during this crisis. And I think that both of them, Cuomo and Newsom, are acquitting themselves quite well, as are many other governors. And they are moving forward with steps to protect their constituents, and without waiting for guidance from the federal level, because the federal government is more chaotic at this point than state governments. And I think that if you see the recent polling from Nate Silver, the governors are scoring much higher with their constituents and have much higher approval ratings with their constituents than does the president of the United States. In fact, the president is hovering at around the 40% approval rating, and Governor Newsom, in contrast, is up at an 83% approval rating.
Well, Phil, what do you think? Do you think this will forever change the relationship and the balance of power between the federal, the state, and the local officials and levels? Well,
it's interesting. We have a sort of a tug of war going on between, like, is Donald Trump, the president, going to say when we reopen for business, and then you have these governors, Democratic governors on both sides of the country saying, no, we're going to do it as a unit. Bottom line, it's going to be local health care people who decide, local health care doctors who decide what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. Because not all is politics all local. So is health. It's what you are encountering in your situation, in your community, and that is where we're going to see the final answer, I think, in a lot of these questions.
Yeah, and let's not forget, it was the local that started it, right?
Yes.
In particular, Santa Clara County and
right.
Dr. Sarah
It
Cody.
wasn't the governor that started this, it was the locals.
That's right. All right, Phil Matier, thank you so much for your time. Nate Ballard, a pleasure having you join us today as well.
Thank you.
A reminder, you can read Phil Matier's columns in the San Francisco Chronicle every Wednesday and every Sunday. Please do so, always great insight. All right, gentlemen, when we come back on air, we have an expert to talk to about the state of the job market. Who's hiring right now? Who's not? And what's going to happen in the future? We'll continue the conversation on our live stream platforms right now. Take a short break on air. All right, folks. Phil is still with us, and happy to chat a little bit more about what's happening here. Phil, you can still hear me, right, with our Facebook viewers?
Cut me off?
Yeah?
Hello?
Hey, okay.
Oh, there we are.
Hey, I really wanted to ask you if you think, with this Western alliance, right,
Yeah.
of Newsom and also the governors of Washington and Oregon, Brown and Inslee, and of course there's a similar one going on the Eastern Seaboard, the Governors Alliance. To what extent do you think that they will all need to work together? Because you have these regional concerns and sort of regional approaches, but doesn't the center of the country need to be brought in as well? And all those states, Florida, Louisiana, Wyoming, where they have a very different picture and very different sense of how to deal with this. I mean, to what extent do they have to be brought in too?
Well, they don't necessarily have to be brought in. They may not want to be brought in. I'm not sure the people in Kansas, Georgia, or Florida want to be dictated by the guidelines set by California and New York.
Yet we have flights between our states.
Exactly. That's why I said earlier that a lot of what the governor of California is talking about depends on what the governors of other states, Nevada and such, say, okay?
Yeah.
A lot of this is going to be decided, we are a nation of states, and this reaffirms that. But yes, as you said, we have flights. We have flights to other countries. We still have direct flights to China, to Italy, and places like that. So you're right. It is a global world now that can be moved very quickly. And that's going to be part of the equation going forward as well.
All right, Phil, we could talk all day, but we're out of time. I'm going back on air. Good to see you.
Have a good one. I'll see you later.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, we're back in 6. All right, folks, going back on air. All right. 3, 2. Welcome back. Now let's get to our next expert of the day. He's the founder of WorkStream. They work with hundreds of businesses and help them with automating the hiring and onboarding process. So joining us is founder Desmond Lim. How are you, Desmond?
I'm well. And you?
I'm doing well, too. Thank you. I mean, we have jobs, and we're thankful for that, because all we're hearing about right now is people losing their jobs, especially the hourly workers. So you have the big picture, right? So tell us, how does the job board look right now? Is it way down, and which industries are way down more than other industries?
Yeah, that is great. That is great for you to ask. So we surely see a mix. So there's surely many companies that are not hiring. As you all know, restaurants, hotels, cafes, they're all closed. So for those job postings, they are way down. But there are still some that are, trying to hire.
Which
and
ones?
for those that are still trying to hire, they are like trying to hire more. So some of them are like this, actually senior living homes, supermarkets, companies that are trying to hire drivers. So in those sectors, we see a trend that is actually going upwards. So for example, I would say that in terms of job posting for drivers, we see a trend of almost 3x growth. And in terms of job posting for these nurses, we see a trend of almost like 2x.
And are those wages actually going up in those industries in which you say they're really ramping up right now?
Yeah, in terms of wages, it has actually stayed flat based on what we see, right? But I think there's just much more job openings for some of those roles, even though I think overall pay has stayed flat. In certain roles, like in this nurses, where there's maybe high risk being at this front line, for those we have seen the wage go up slightly.
Okay, so if certain industries are contracting and others are expanding, so to speak, if you're a job seeker and you're thinking, God, I need to make some money right now, are there certain regions in the state that you would send people to where those regions are actually doing more hiring?
Yeah, I would say so. I think mostly in this actually coastal regions, those been actually generally down. Just think about New York and in the Bay Area. But I would say in this Midwest, those are still actually holding strong. Actually, I would say that in terms of trends we see in this Midwest and in the South, maybe about only half of these restaurants, hotels are closed. So maybe about half they are, still open. So we surely see if you are in those areas, you should surely be trying for jobs. I would say that being said, we do see a trend of whereby for those jobs that are still open, we see more people trying for those jobs. For example, we have a client, it's a gas station chain. They have about 50 roles open. In the past 3 days, we have seen about 7,000 people try for those roles. That is almost like a 5x jump.
So I want to ask you, eventually we will come out of this, and in a post-COVID-19 world, do you see any changes in the way people look for jobs or interview applicants?
Yeah, I think so. I do see a few trends on that front. So we have had several clients come to us saying, you want to talk about this actually contactless screening, trying to meet with people via this video, via texting. So that is part of our core software that we have been able to do it. We help our clients to be able to screen people and source them and to actually talk to them either via Zoom, via video, or even via texting on the phone. So we should see a trend to move towards that. People want to first meet you when you're home, and they want to be able to see your face and talk to you prior to bringing you to where they are at. So yes.
Got it. So based on all these changes that are already starting to happen and will accelerate even in a post-COVID-19 world, and based on what you see in terms of, what the jobs will be, what can a job seeker do right now to kind of put themselves in the best position to get one of those jobs once companies really start to hire again?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in terms of how they should prep, I think this is a great time to actually go back to school, right? We have all these classes, they're all now online. So that's surely something that we've been trying to tell our current hourly folks to, hey, take this break, take this time. If you really can't find work, stay home. Actually try to take some online courses that can be very helpful. So I think that is some trend that we see. Second trend that we see is trying to tell people, hey, try to be open for job changes, right? We see a trend whereby more people are going to work from home, right? So restaurant, cafes, hotels, they are going to pivot to actually cater towards that need. So we are trying to tell people, hey, be open to job changes, be open to job like training. All those will be very helpful for you.
All right, Desmond Lim, we are out of time. Although I'm going to spend 5 seconds and just ask you, how long do you think before the economy is back? 5 seconds.
I think it'll be back in about 3 to 6 months from what I see.
Okay.
I hope it'll be sooner, but
All
yeah.
right, well, we'll check back with you then. Desmond Lim, founder of WorkStream, thank you so much for your time and insight today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Take care. All right, when we come back on air, we're going to take a short break here, but when we come back, Dr. Alok Patel is going to give us an update on the drug hydroxychloroquine. We'll be right back. All right, folks. Hey, we're still with Desmond here, although we do have to hang up, right, to kind of get ready for... Oh, hey, Desmond, we have time for one more question.
Great.
Do you have any data on employees calling in sick? Is that,
Yep.
are we seeing that in huge numbers?
Yes, we do have that.
All right, tell us about that.
Right.
What are you seeing?
Yeah, sure. Perfect, great. So we definitely see about 35% of folks who are trying to call in sick. So we think that is like a very, very big jump. There's a few factors that is trying to drive that. Some of them are sick because they're tired, but many of them are trying to call sick because they have to stay home to actually take care of their kids, because kids are now out of school, so they are not able to leave their kids. We see a trend too of whereby many folks, their parents, they are sick too. So many of these elderly folks, they don't have the choice but to call in sick so that they can stay back home. So I think that is a very clear trend that we see.
So then are any employers offering additional help to people, who are in those situations so that they don't need to resort to calling in sick?
I think some of them are. So we see a trend of about 20% of these folks, of these elderly folks, they are trying to ask for more loans. So that is what they are now doing, trying to ask for more loans. And many of these businesses, companies are trying to be helpful by giving the loans that they can, because many of these folks, they can't even pay rental. So.
All right. Tough times for a lot of folks, but you also offer some hope as far as how people can position themselves for the future. So, Desmond Lim, thank you so much. Really great to see you. Now we're going to leave you for real. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed and learned something from that conversation. That was very insightful for me as well. So, we're going to shift from jobs now to medical, getting ready to come back on air. Welcome back. We are now able to bring you even more content now that we have this new platform at 3 o'clock every day. That means we get more from our special correspondent, Dr. Alok Patel. Today, he's giving us an update on a popular and controversial prescription drug.
Chloroquine is in headlines again, and it's not for a good reason. It's because of the potentially deadly side effects. I'm Dr. Alok Patel, and let's talk about it on today's Doctor's Note. Now, everyone in the medical community wants to see a treatment available for COVID-19, and both chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are being looked at for their potential. But a recent study in Brazil underscores the fact that we need to be really careful about our approach when it comes to chloroquine. Researchers gave hospitalized COVID-19 patients either a low dose or a high dose of chloroquine phosphate, and they found that the higher dose was associated with a deadly heart arrhythmia or an irregular heartbeat. And the study was actually stopped after several patients died. This echoes what doctors all over the world are saying. Even in this pandemic, potential treatments need to be closely studied to determine their efficacy, the right dose, their safety profile, and which patients should get them. Hydroxychloroquine which is generally considered to be a safer version of chloroquine, the one the president called a game changer, can still have toxic side effects. Now, these drugs are being used and studied in various hospitals in the country, but this is under close monitoring and expert guidance. So people should definitely not be hoarding or taking chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine at home. It can be life-threatening, and it'll worsen the drug shortage. I mean, general rule, please do not take any prescription medications without doctor's guidance. No matter what you may hear or read online, there are currently no treatments or ways to prevent COVID-19 with a pill. Until science learns more, do what you're doing, keep yourself and your family safe, and stay home.
From Dr. Alok Patel, and as the governor said as well, let's take action based on science and data. Thank you so much for joining us on this new interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here every day at 3 p.m. on air and on live stream, answering your questions. Facebook Live, YouTube Live, abc7news.com, and the ABC7 News app. Now stick around for World News Tonight. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.